You can't rest folded up like an accordion. And I'll lie down diagonally across the room. There's just room for me that way. That's one advantage of weightlessness. You can lie down standing on your head, and go to sleep and like it. But I forgot. You've never been weightless before, have you? Does it make you sick?" "Not so much now, except that I feel awfully weird inside. I was horribly dizzy and nauseated at first, but it's going away." "That's good. It makes lots of people pretty sick. In fact, some folks get awfully sick and can't seem to get used to it at all. It's the canals in the inner ear that do most of it, you know. However, if you're as well as that already, you'll be a regular spacehound in half an hour. I've been weightless for weeks at a stretch, out in the Sirius, and now I've got so I really like it. Here, we better keep in touch." He found her hand and tucked it under his arm. "Stabilize our positions more, besides keeping us from getting too lonesome, here in the dark," he concluded in a matter-of-fact voice. "Thanks for saying us. But you would, wouldn't you?" And a wave of admiration went through her for the real and chivalrous manhood of the man with whom she had been forced by circumstances to cast her lot. "How long must we stay here?" "As long as the air lasts, and I'd like to stay here longer than that. We don't want to move around any more than we absolutely have to until their rays are off of us, and we have no way of knowing how long that will be. Also, we better keep still. I don't know what kind of an audio system they've got, but there's no use in taking unnecessary chances. All X, I'm an oyster's little sister." And for many minutes the two remained motionless and silent. Now and then Nadia twitched and started at some vague, real or imaginary sound. Now and then her fingers tightened upon his biceps, and he pressed her hand with his great arm in reassurance and understanding. Once a wall of their cell resounded under the impact of a fierce blow, and Stevens instantly threw his arm around the girl, twisting himself between her and the threatening wall, ready for any emergency. But nothing more happened. The door remained closed. The cell stayed bottle-tight, and time wore slowly on. All too soon, the unmistakable symptoms of breathing an unfit atmosphere made themselves apparent, and Stevens, after testing each of the doors, drew the girl into a larger room where they breathed deeply of the fresh, cool air. "How did you know that this room was whole?" asked Nadia. "We might have stepped out into space, mightn't we?" "No. If this room had lost its tightness, the door wouldn't have opened. They won't open if there's a difference of 1 kilogram pressure on the two sides. That's how I knew that the room we were in at first was cut in two. The door into that air brake wouldn't move." "What comes next?" "I don't know exactly what to do. We'd better hold a little council of war. They may have gone." Stevens broke off as the structure began to move, and they settled down upon what had been one of the side walls. Greater and greater became the acceleration until their apparent weight was almost as much as it would have been upon Earth, at which point it became constant. "But they haven't," he continued the interrupted sentence. "This seems to be a capture and seizure, as well as an attack, so we'll have to take the risk of looking at them. Besides, it's getting cold in here. 1 or 2 of the adjoining cells have apparently been ruptured, and we're radiating our heat out into space, so we'll have to get into a lifeboat or freeze. I'll go pick out the best one. Wonder if I'd better take you with me, or hide you and come back after you." "Don't worry about that. I'm coming with you," Nadia declared positively. "Just as well, probably," he assented, and they set out. A thorough exploration of all the tight connecting cells revealed that not a lifeboat within their reach remained intact, but that habitable and navigable portions of 3 such craft were available. Selecting the most completely equipped of these, they took up their residence therein by entering it and closing the massive insulating door. Stevens disconnected all the lights save one, and so shielded that one before turning it on that it merely lighted the utter darkness into a semi-permeable gloom. He then stepped up to the lookout plate, and with his hand upon the control, pondered long the possible consequences of what he wished to do. What harm would it do to take just a little peek? I don't know. That's the dickens of it. Maybe none, and then again, maybe a lot. You see, we don't know who or what we're up against. The only thing we know is that they've got us beat 100 ways, and we've got to act accordingly. We've got to chance it sometime, though, if we can ever get away, so we might as well do it now. I'll put it on a very short range first, and see what we can see. By the small number of cells we've got here, I'm afraid they've split us up lengthwise, too, so that instead of having a whole slice of the old watermelon to live in, we've got only about a sixth of one, shaped about like a piece of a restaurant pie. One thing I can do, though. I'll turn on the communicator receiver and put it on full coverage. Maybe we can hear something useful. Putting a little power upon the visiray plate, he moved the point of projection a short distance from their hiding place, so that the plate showed a view of the wreckage. The upper half of the vessel was still intact, the lower half a jumble of sharply cut fragments. From each of the larger pieces, a brilliant ray of tangible force stretched outward. Suddenly, their receiver sounded behind them, as the high-powered transmitter in the telegraph room tried to notify headquarters of their plight. "Arcturus attacked and cut up, being taken in tow." Rapidly, as the message was uttered, the transmitter died with a rattle in the middle of a word, and Nadia looked at Stevens with foreboding in her eyes. "They've got something, that's one thing sure, to be able to neutralize our communicator beams that way," he admitted. "Not so good. We'll have to play this close to our vests, girl." "Are you just trying to cheer me up, or do you really think we have a chance?" she demanded. "I want to know just where we stand." "I'm coming clean with you, no kidding. If we can get away, we'll be all X, because I'll bet a farm that by this time Brandon's got everything those birds have, and maybe more. They beat us to it, that's all. I'm kind of afraid, though, that getting away isn't going to be quite as simple as shooting fish down a well." Far ahead of them a port opened, a lifeboat shot out at its full power, and again their receiver tried to burst into sound, but it was a vain attempt. The sound died before one complete word could be uttered, and the lifeboat, its power completely neutralized by the rays of the tiny craft of the enemy, floated gently back toward the mass of its parent and accompanied it in its headlong flight. Several more lifeboats made the attempt, as the courageous officers of the Arcturus, some of whom had apparently succeeded in eluding the vigilance of the captors, launched the little shells from various ports. But as each boat issued, its power was neutralized, and it found itself dragged helplessly along in the grip of one of those mysterious, brilliant rays of force. At least one hidden officer must have been watching the fruitless efforts, for the next lifeboat to issue made no attempt either to talk or to flee, but from it there flamed out into space a concentrated beam of destruction, the terrible ray of annihilation against which no known substance could endure for a moment. The ray which had definitely outlawed war. But even that frightful weapon was useless. It spent its force harmlessly upon an impalpable, invisible barrier 100 yards from its source, and the bold lifeboat disappeared in one blinding explosion of incandescence as the captor showed its real power in retaliation. Stevens, jaw hard set, leaped from the screen, then brought himself up so quickly that he skated across the smooth steel floor. Shutting off the lookout plate, he led the half-fainting girl across the room to a comfortable seat and sat down beside her, raging but thoughtful. Nadia soon recovered. "Why are you acting so contrary to your nature? Is it because of me?" she demanded. "A dozen times I've seen you start to do something and then change your mind. I will not be a load on you nor hinder you in anything you want to do." I told your father I'd look after you, and I'm going